In 2014, I boarded a train. It's been 10 years and I still haven't reached my destination. An embarrassing amount of time passed before I realized something was wrong. I had made this train journey almost daily for over 2 decades and could tell by muscle memory now when the brakes would screech and the doors would open. And yet it hadn't happened yet. I checked my watch. It displayed 4:15. That's odd. We definitely should have stopped somewhere by now. I looked out the window to try and discern where we were. I only studied the passing landscape for a few seconds before my brain began to scream at me, signaling that there was something wrong with what I was looking at. I couldn't make out any particular shapes outside. It seemed as if the landscape had been reformed into a singular blob of mass and color. Nothing that I was looking at resembled anything that I had seen before. I stood up and made my way to the end door of the carriage, trying to see if the other carriages were experiencing the same problem. It was locked. What's more, after peering through the carriage window, I saw nothing but the swirling colors around us. It was as if our train was connected to nothing. It was as if we were alone. I heard the sound of yelling and glass breaking from behind me. I spun around and saw a couple passengers crowding around a man standing on one of the chairs, looking towards the now open window. "You're seeing this too, right?" he called out, his voice queasy. "This shit ain't real." No one replied. "I can't do this, man. I don't know what's going on." I could see fire burning in his eyes, his hair whipping around due to the draft. As he looked outside the open window, I saw a strange calmness settle over him. He had resigned himself to this fate, whatever it was. He took a deep breath and jumped. His jump seemed to have very little momentum. Instead, as soon as his entire body left the train carriage, he froze into place. He was still for a blissful second, before he separated before our eyes. Every piece of him disjoined from each other, and he was left frozen in place as billions of molecules vaguely resembling a person. And yet he was still alive. Or at least I gathered from the screams that emanated from him. Panicking, I fell to the ground, cupping my ears with my palms, trying to escape the raw, guttural sounds that pierced my head. It was the sound of death from someone who could not die. I'm not sure how long it's been since I made the mistake of boarding this train. None of us passengers have aged, or eaten, or done anything that is usually recognized as being required for survival. Sometimes we pass the passenger outside, still frozen in time, like a lighthouse of solidity in a sea of shapelessness. And the worst part? We always hear him before we see him. Stories number 2. My daughter experienced an odd allergic reaction after we went on vacation. My daughter, Sienna, dropped her bags in the foyer and started walking towards the stairs. "I'm going to take a shower," she declared. "Take your bags upstairs with you," I pointed. "Ugh," she sighed in frustration as she stomped back over to retrieve her bags. "And don't use all the hot water," I added when she was halfway up the stairs. "I want to take a shower too." The two of us had just returned home after spending the weekend in Florida. It was a fun trip, but it was exhausting. To help myself relax, I went into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and downed it in one gulp before heading up to my room to watch a little TV. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard Sienna call out. "Mom," she yelled. I could tell from her tone of voice that something was wrong. I ran the rest of the way up the stairs and over to the bathroom door. "Sienna," I knocked on the door. "What's the matter?" "There's something wrong with my skin," she sobbed. I tried the doorknob, thankful to find that it wasn't locked. Once I was in the bathroom, I rushed over to the shower and pulled the curtain aside. "Oh my God!" I gasped when I saw the way her skin was sloughing off her body, leaving her muscles and tendons exposed. "What's happening to me?" "I think you're having an allergic reaction," I said. "A what?" She couldn't hear me clearly because of the loose skin that was covering her ears. "An allergic reaction," I repeated. "Your body is rejecting the new skin." By the time I was done talking, the skin she had been wearing was lying in the bottom of the tub. Upset, Sienna dropped to her knees and started bawling. "I really liked that skin," she said between sobs. "I know you did, honey," I tried to soothe her. "What am I going to do now?" she asked. "I can't go outside looking like this." She gestured at herself. "Don't worry," I replied. "I have a spare skin in my closet you can use until we can go back out and find you a new one." Stories number 3. I found a kid's diary at a book at a yard sale. I'm scared. Day 1. I wanna go to school. I miss gym. We used to play tag at recess. Mom says we're unschooling. What's that? It's part of our van life aesthetic. Dunno what that means. Day 2. Today, Mom yelled that I was crying. I don't like van life. She needed videos of me crying for Instagram. She says it's for money. Day 3. Dad hurts Mom at night. She screams, "Oh God, can't sleep." Day 5. Mom Dad had a big fight. Mom cried, Dad left. We're parked at Walmart now. Hate it. Day 10. Big bro Tim is sad he can't go to school. He wants to be in architecture, like Bob the Builder. He misses his friends and school. Mom told being influencers is how we truly happy. Day 11. Mom made me open my presents 20 times, cause I didn't look happy enough. She hit me every time. Day 12. Baby Billy got hurt. Mom said on YouTube he hurt himself with sharp toys, we only have soft ones. Day 13. I can't wash my hair with warm water or bathe every day. Mom says it wastes water and hurts the environment. We can't have meat no more, we are vegan now, I want chicken nuggets. Day 14. I don't like the van. It's always moving, makes me puke. Miss Jamie at school told me I was the best student, but Mom Dad say studying is a waste of time. Day 20. Mom gives me donuts every day. My tummy hurts. Dad says I'm being ingrateful, and Mom don't cook. When driving, Mom Dad sit in the front seat, and baby Billy is always in back. He cries, they yell to make him stop. Bro Tim always sings to me and Billy. I love Bro Tim, Billy. Bro Tim hasn't eaten anything in days, he looks sad, sad. Day 21. Bro Tim is real sick. He feels hot like a stove. I asked Mom to take him to doctor. She said we need to make a video of campaign gone wrong, with him very sick. Hospital's near, but we're not allowed to go. I tried sneaking Mom's phone to call for help. She caught me, slapped me, called me a pig. I like Peppa Pig, though. Tim bro won't wake up. Day 22. Mom and Dad took bro Tim somewhere, they won't say where. Day 23. Our YouTube views are low, so Mom says we have to change things up. She said the next video will be about me breaking my arm and leg. Mom is screaming now. Why are they looking at me with that weird face? Next entry, scribbled in haste. Dad gave me choco milk, and I'm feeling sleepy now. They're talking me somewhere, don't know where. Maybe they're talking me to see big bro Tim. I'll be happy to see him, but what about baby Billy? Stories number 4. My wife called me at work and told me we'd won the lottery. The call came halfway through my lunch break. Guess what? Her voice cut through the factory floor's buzz. I barely heard her over the clanging and shouting. I cupped my hand over my ear. We won, Danny. We won the lottery. My heart jolted. What? We did it. We're winners, she said, laughing. Her laugh, God, that laugh. It's got razor blades in it. Go tell your boss what for. I stared out at the factory. The stench of burning machinery, faces that looked more like ghosts. I thought of my boss, his sticky breath on my neck as he handed me yet another list of work. I'm done here. I puffed out my chest, marched into his office, and told him exactly what I thought of him. Every filthy, festering thing I'd kept under my skin. I told him he was a joke, told him his half-bald head made him look like a used condom. Told him I was done. I quit. The look on his face alone made my day. And as I walked out, head high, I felt something crackling through me. I spent the afternoon doing things I'd only ever dreamed of. Fancy food. Expensive clothes. All the good stuff. Everywhere I went, people looked at me like I was someone, like I mattered. For the first time, I didn't feel small. Finally, I went home, still riding high. I opened the door and there she was, standing in the kitchen with that same smirk she always had. I hated that look. Her arms folded, her head cocked like she was about to launch into some lecture. God, it set my teeth on edge. I took a hard gulp before speaking. "Let's see it then," I said. "The ticket." She smiled and tossed it nonchalantly on the table. I picked it up, held it up to the light. And I stopped. There it was. Not the big prize. A pittance. A lousy 50. My face went cold. It's just 50, I said, my voice hollow. She threw her head back and laughed, that high, mocking laugh that pierced through my ears. "Well, yeah. 50's still winning, isn't it?" "What, you actually thought we were millionaires?" She threw her head back again. "Fucking dumbass." She looked me up and down like I was a piece of crap. "Honestly, Danny, how gullible can you be?" But I quit my dash. I stood there, watching her, like it was all happening in slow motion, hearing that same laugh that had torn at me for 24 years. 24 years I'd endured the relentless bullying, the mind games. Everything went red. Before I knew it, I was reaching for the knife on the counter. I barely felt my hand wrap around it. She must have only just seen it as the tip made contact with her eyeball. And as I watched her crumple to the floor, her screams fading into a wet gurgle, a comical thought entered my mind. Looks like I won big after all. Stories number 5. I was born with the gift of healing, but it came with a terrible curse. I was born a miracle. The people, desperate, broken, and clinging to hope, said I was a gift, a blessing. A gift from the heavens. The sickly neighbor had visited the day I was born. The grim reaper was trailing right behind, its shadow looming and cold. The neighbor leaned over my cradle, touched my tiny fingers. The grim reaper hesitated and then vanished. It didn't take long for the people to notice. "Touch him and you'll be healed." And they were right. They came in droves. The dying, the desperate, the shattered. Those with missing limbs had their limbs grow back. Those with deaf ears heard the world awaken. Those with blindness witnessed the blessing of sight. Those with weary bodies felt strength flood their veins. Those resigned to empty cradles felt life stir within their wombs. It wasn't just the body I could fix. The lonely felt whole. The fearful found courage. The grieving rediscovered joy. But they never lived long. A few years, if they were lucky. Months, weeks, days, if they weren't. Still, they kept coming. For the good fortune that resided in the touch of my hand. Ignorant of the consequences that the touch carried. Now I sit on a throne of gold, surrounded by treasures beyond count, offerings from the grateful. Food, jewels, silks. Meaningless riches that I can't enjoy. Today is no different. The knock at the door. The line of the sick and desperate, their eyes burning with hope. They come to me one by one. A woman clutching her arm. A child barely able to stand. A man coughing up blood. They kneel. They touch my palm. And they leave whole and cured. I hate it. Being revered as divine, when all I grant is a curse masked as healing. By the end of the day, the room is quiet. I look down at my hands, trembling in fear. I glance at my left palm. The number stares back at me, 1. It flickers faintly, fading, until it grows bold again. One more day. That's all I'm granted. Just enough to survive until tomorrow. Just enough to stay tethered to this cursed existence. I look at my right palm. 127. 127 years of life stolen from those who I heal. No. From those who I cursed today. The number begins to dim, fading until it vanishes entirely. And then, the voice speaks. You've done well. Fear courses in my veins like blood. How long? I ask, my voice small and pathetic. How long must I keep doing this? A pause. I feel the weight of its gaze, though I cannot see it. I've only seen a glimpse of its form when I was a child. Not in its entirety, no one could survive that. As long as humans exist, you're my medium. The last one killed himself, I won't have you repeat that. So, I made you pseudo-immortal. Their stolen years and souls, you will deliver them all to me, until the last human dies. Stories number 6. My husband has always treated me right. Being pregnant is exhausting. The hormones, the muscle aches, and don't even get me started on my bladder control. Last week I coughed too hard and had to change my undies. Fortunately, I have a wonderful hubby, and he's been taking care of me every step of the way. At least, that's what I thought, until he brought home takeout tonight. Honey, I'm home. I've got dinner. Thank goodness, I'm starving, I said. What did you get? Your favorite, salmon nigiri from that sushi place on 10th Street. I could not believe what he was saying. Are you stupid? I asked him point blank. What's wrong? Not in the mood for sushi. Hello. I said, grabbing my belly with both hands. Pregnant. I can't eat raw fish. Do you know how dangerous that could be for the baby? Normally I would chalk it up to my husband being tired after a long day of work, but my husband has read A Husband's Guide to Pregnancy twice. He knows what I can and cannot eat. Half the time, he knows what's happening to my body even better than I do. But when I told him about eating raw fish, he just got this wide-eyed look on his face and went completely silent. He refused to even look at me. I've tried to talk to him since then, but he's been unusually quiet. Whenever I try to talk about the baby, he quickly changes the subject, or finds an excuse to get out of the house. I've run it through my head 1,000 times, and I can only think of one possible explanation. I don't think he wants this baby anymore. I think he knew that eating raw fish could get me sick with listeria and kill our baby. I don't think our baby will be safe with my husband in the picture, and I will not lose this baby. The next morning when he went to work I started my preparations. If he wanted to poison our child, then I was going to fight fire with fire. I cooked my husband's favorite dinner, carnitas tacos with homemade corn tortillas. Something flavorful so he wouldn't notice that I added a dash of rat poison. When my husband got home and saw I had made dinner, his eyes lit right up. He was smiling as he shoveled taco after taco into his mouth. I'm so glad you're cooking again, my husband said. I thought you deserved some pampering for once. A tear rolled across my husband's cheek. You know, after what happened, I wasn't sure you'd ever be the same. What do you mean? The miscarriage. You took it so hard, even convinced yourself you were still pregnant. It's my fault too. I didn't know how to talk to you when you were like that. I didn't know how to be strong for you. But that's all in the past now. Maybe one day soon we can even try for another. Stories number 51. My new neighbors are vegans and they won't shut up about it. I moved into my house 6 months ago. It was a no-brainer. It was far enough away from the city to have some peace and quiet but close enough to visit when necessary. Trees provided good shade in the summer, and the rent was cheap. It was perfect. Then my new neighbors moved in. Typical yuppie idiots, moved out of the city but brought the city with them. Drove a Tesla and drank kale smoothies. And gardened. I tried to ignore them, but they began to ruin everything. They constantly blasted their crap modern music, disrespected the local shop owners, threw parties that brought strangers to the previously quiet neighborhood. And they kept taking up more and more space with their noxious eyesore of a garden, raising herbs and vegetables to eat as part of the ridiculous, environmentally friendly, vegan cooking they wouldn't stop talking about. Christ, that garden turned my stomach. The lights, the sounds, the smells, I hated it all. And I began to hate them. So I started asking them nicely to tone it down, to turn down the lights, quiet the music, be considerate of their neighbors and the place they'd moved to. But they ignored me. We bought this place and will live as we choose. Then I proceeded to asking less nicely. I left notes on their car and door, filed noise complaints with the local police, rallied the other neighbors against them. But I was new here, and they had lots of money to throw around, so my efforts went nowhere. They even filed a complaint with the police against me, if you can believe it. Said I was harassing them. They had no idea what harassment was. This went on for weeks, getting progressively worse, the noise and lights and smell driving me insane. Then they crossed the line. I was enjoying a quiet night in when lights came on and shone directly into my living room. And when I looked out of my window, one of them had the nerve to look back at me and smirk. Smirk. Like I was some country bumpkin they'd put in his place. I'd had it. I got up and marched over to their house, seething and determined to end this. I banged on the door until it opened. "Oh, it's you." "Yes, it's me," I replied. "The neighbor whose life you've been making hell since you moved in." "We need to talk." "About what?" he asked. "How you've been harassing us." "We've already filed a complaint." "Yes, I know. I was hoping we could resolve this over tea like civilized people." He stared at me. "Fine, come in, let's talk." As he closed the door behind me and started toward the sitting room, I ejected my fangs and plunged them into his neck, savoring the tangy taste of blood that flowed from him like a torrent, ruined only by one lingering scent. For Christ's sake, enough with the fucking garlic. Stories number 7. Dad taught me something I could do with pillowcases, and I'm glad he did. I wrapped my arms around Lug, wrapping him tightly as I squeezed my eyes shut. Mom and Dad were arguing again, probably because Mom got drunk, and I was in my room, always terrified of my mother and feeling pain for my father. Fortunately, I still had Lug. Lug was my big stuffed teddy bear that I had gotten when I was a baby, one of the only presents my parents ever gave me, and the only one I still held on to. One day, Mom had gotten really angry. She was yelling at Dad and me really loud, and she ended up ripping Lug open. I cried a lot that day, thinking that Lug was dead forever. Dad tried to convince me otherwise, and eventually he showed me a secret. He took an extra pillowcase and put it over Lug's body, which he had stitched up. And now, Martin, Lug is alive again. He's a pillowcase teddy bear now, and he's a ghost. And he was right. Dad was a very meek and kind person, and he made Lug come back, even if he was a ghost. I wouldn't let him get hurt ever again. But then, Mom was yelling really loudly again. I couldn't quite make out her angry words, but she started hitting things. Banging and crashing came from downstairs, and I squeezed Lug tighter, beginning to cry. Why couldn't Mom just stop? Martin. I opened my eyes in shock. For what was maybe the first time in my life, I heard Dad's voice loudly and clearly. And he was scared. I grabbed Lug and rushed out, taking the steps downstairs 2 at a time. Dad had never sounded like that, and it made my stomach twist up. When I got down, Mom stood over Dad's body on the floor with a brown, bleeding bat, a small puddle of blood underneath. Dad wasn't moving. She turned her head towards me, but it was not my mother. It was something mad and dangerous. Something evil with black and empty eyes. You don't like us fighting, do you? Well, now we won't. Come here and give me a hug. Its lips didn't move, but I heard it clearly. It brought the bat up, taking aim for my head. I stared in fear, silent and terrified by what I was seeing. The bat hit my head and the world turned blurry. Our front door burst open then, and the sounds of rushing feet and calling orders came in. I couldn't hear them, but I could still see. They rushed onto Mom, but she fought back with terrifying strength, until they eventually took her down. They took Mom away, and hospital workers rushed in. I crawled clumsily over to Dad, but I didn't cry. I knew his secret. A shaky smile crossed my lips as I put Lug's pillowcase over his head. It would be alright now. And now, Dad, you're alive again. Stories number 8. My son was talking about leaving home. I showed him why he should stay. My son looked intently at his mother and I across the kitchen table. He looked like he had something to say. Mom, Dad, I've decided that I don't want to work on the farm. We were afraid this was coming. Ever since I'd taken him into the city last year. The lights and sounds had filled his head with empty promises. I knew I'd need to set him straight. Son, we're ranchers. It's our legacy. Or did you forget? He hardened his face with boyish certainty. I didn't forget anything, he said, I just want to do something better with my life. I pretended not to feel the sting in his words. We finished breakfast in silence. He glared at me as I took a pointed bite of my breakfast sausage. As my wife cleared the table, I told my son to fetch his work boots. He scoffed. I'm not gonna spend my life cleaning barns. Anger flared in my chest, but I bit my tongue. I couldn't blame him for wanting to make his own way, misguided as it was. But a boy his age was like wet clay, able to be molded. He just needed the right hand. I stepped outside, my son begrudgingly following behind. His eyes seemed a bit guilty as we walked towards the outbuildings. To leave home meant our family legacy died with him. I decided some real ranch work might change his mind. Something he'd been begging to see ever since he was little. The killing floor. I opened the door to the slaughterhouse and went inside, my son following apprehensively behind. He'd never been in here before. His whole life, he'd begged his grandfather and I to do man's work. I'd always promised he'd get his chance one day. He was finally ready. We searched the stock pens, their chittering occupants huddling against the grimy metal walls, until we found a suitable specimen. A female, past her birthing prime. The perfect way to let my son get his hands dirty. I stunned her with an electric prod before dragging her up to the kill room. My son bounced nervously on his feet as I chained the squealing beast to the floor. "Are you sure, Dad?" he asked. "What if I mess it up?" I nodded reassuringly. "You won't. It's in your blood." The mammal uselessly flailed its two pitiful legs as he approached, mouthing something in that primitive language they spoke. Her two panicked eyes gazed into all seven of his as he closed his mandibles around her head, wrenching it off in one wet jerk. "You're a natural," I cried. My son beamed with accomplishment as the female twitched on the floor. "You know, Dad," he said, runnels of red dripping down his carapace, "I think I like the ranch life after all." I smiled, my antennae dancing with pride as we dragged another human screaming from its pen. "Just like your old man." Stories number 9. I have a secret. People used to say I had a superpower. Ever since I can remember, I've been able to tell if someone has committed murder, directly or indirectly. Even as a 5-year-old I knew. It didn't matter how secretive someone was, how well they had covered their tracks. The blood never lied. It stained their hands and arms, dripping slowly down their fingertips. It never dried, never stopped running unless they were caught and stopped. Then it disappeared forever. My parents always thought this was just a result of my overactive imagination, until one day my brother died. The day he died my father's hands dripped crimson. I told my mother but she just smiled sadly, refusing to believe her husband had murdered her son. A year later I was vindicated. I was 8 years old when he was convicted and given a life sentence. At that moment I believed my secret could help, could stop crimes like that altogether. How wrong I was. At 15 I was helping my local police department track down criminals, and by 17 I had been offered a spot at the top criminal justice school in the country. I gladly accepted, graduating top of my class in just 3 years. It was enough to make anyone giddy. I used my newfound knowledge and my special ability to become one of the best private investigators in America. Criminals were caught left and right with me on the job. But today I am writing to inform my clients that I am shutting down my business. I've given up. At 8 years old I wanted to make the world better, but I can't. Criminals are easy for me to find. Their hands never lie. Unfortunately, I can't always convict them. I watch as they become celebrities, idols, as they lead nations. I watch as people fawn over them, unaware that these people have slaughtered thousands. The individuals I'm talking about have never killed someone personally, but are indirectly responsible for far more death and destruction than your regular murderer. We are living in the beginning of an apocalypse that I can't stop. I know that they've killed people, but I can't stop them. I can't do anything. I am powerless, and I've finally decided to accept it. If no one can stop this, soon everyone's hands will be stained with sticky, crimson blood. Stories number 10. The child we created could see the future, but refused to see more. I've been stationed for years now, working on projects I'm not supposed to understand. My job? I only test the products we're given. I'm just another cog in the machine. Each cog in a machine interacts solely with those immediately beside it, without ever seeing the full mechanism. A cog that reaches beyond its place threatens to break the entire machine. Broken cogs like those are discarded. 9 out of 10 trials fail. The infants don't make it through the modifications. The few that do live, they're different. What you would call science fiction is routine for us. It does make one curious. Curiosity, however, is a death sentence here. Dr. Avery, consumed by his curiosity, started asking questions. He was transferred. Broken cogs are discarded. Ashen arrived about a year ago. One of the only successful results we've got. Higher-up sent him down for further development of his powers. His ability to see the future. I would have chuckled if I hadn't spent 14 years of my life witnessing what I did working here. His predictions started small, simple weather patterns, vague at first. Weeks later, he was forecasting rain down to the hour, knowing the exact path of a hurricane long before meteorologists could. 3 months later he stepped up a notch. Global events, financial collapses, geopolitical and market shifts. Then it escalated to cosmic scale, predicting celestial phenomena before any space agency had a chance to detect them. Asteroid paths, solar flares, planetary changes and more. All with unsettling accuracy. Of course, his visions had to be controlled to maintain his sanity. Each session begins with a simple question, gradually escalating to more complex ones, with pauses between two successive questions. Ashen is held in a controlled environment, chains binding each limb, suspended at the center of the gravity-controlled chamber. The boy's gaze is cold and indifferent, always staring into oblivion. Per protocol, we took Ashen from the chamber and settled him into a room to await his request. All successful subjects were granted this privilege. Anything they asked for, they received before testing began. Ashen always requested a fruit basket and a knife. He liked cutting each piece himself, methodical, precise. We did have a time limit. Orders from above. No more than an hour outside the chamber. Should be immediately put back at any signs of abnormality. To start, I chose a question where the answer should be an easy no. Does the human species go extinct within the next 5 years? Ashen's pale blue eyes glow. But this only happens when. Yes. His eyes were icy and unblinking. Subjects had a 0% chance of false positives. How does it happen? His eyes glow again. A minute is the longest it's taken for the glow to fade. This was the first I've seen Ashen express any emotion. Fear. The apple slipped from Ashen's hand. He began to tremble, knocking over the basket as he desperately reached for the knife. Run. He slits his throat and drops dead. Stories number 11. I used to play with the other kids, until the day it started snowing. I used to play with the other children all the time. It took a while for them to trust me, being the new kid. My father had received a promotion, prompting the move from our city to this backarse of nowhere village. Sure, it came with a big country manor and numerous servants, but I still longed for my friends back home. My parents have always been protective of me, which is why I imagined they didn't want me to play with the other kids. I wasn't even allowed to meet them. They homeschooled me with a private tutor, just some low-level groveler at my dad's company, eager to win his approval by tutoring his child, I suppose. I spent most of my days entertaining myself. That got boring quickly. Hence why a few weeks ago I snuck off into the local village I had been forbidden from entering. I tried to inject myself into a game of football some of the kids were having. They were odd. There was something not quite right about them. I ignored my apprehension, however, and proceeded to carry on with the game. They were all so suspicious of me, an outsider. I wondered what their secret was. They had to have been hiding something. Alas, the more I snuck out for daily football games, the more friendships between us started to spark. Trust began to build. The adults would always scowl at me, marching through their small village with axes, scythes, and pickaxes of such. I wondered if they were a cult perhaps? Some weird village people tribe? Maybe that's why mother and father didn't want me meeting them. Then today came. The snow. I was ecstatic when I looked out the window and saw the small white drops falling from the air. I raced outside and stuck my tongue out to catch some. I put on my socks and shoes straight away, ready to go and run around in it with my newfound friends. When I got there, no game was in place though. In fact, when I got there, nobody was there. Nobody other than my father, chatting with one of his colleagues. Sergeant, the task is complete. There are no survivors. My father smiled back to his colleague. Good work. That will send a message to any other villages harboring rebel scum. My father spotted me, frozen in my tracks. And what are you doing here, son? I gulped. I had to tell him the truth. I came to play in the snow, with my friends from the village. He laughed. Snow? He nodded towards the burning pile of corpses, mounted on the small football pitch. There's no snow here, son. Stories number 12. Overeaters Anonymous. As I stand outside of the Overeaters Anonymous meeting, listening to my girlfriend share her success story, on the other side of the door, I turn to the fat man standing next to me. He's smoking a cigarette. I feel like puking my fucking guts out, I say. Losing 100 pounds makes her a better person? She's certainly a hell of a lot less sexy than she used to be. The smoker looks like he wants me to disappear. I continue. I told her that when she was losing the weight. She said I wasn't being supportive. Fuck being supportive, I'm a man, and men have needs. This gets him to acknowledge me. Hey pal, if she wanted to do it, good for her, right? I snort at him and try to appear menacing. The White Knight grumbles something about a new face like hers at their meetings being a good source of inspiration for everyone. He smokes a minute longer and then heads back inside. As the meeting ends, I wait patiently. I watch through the door as countless obese women walk up to her and undoubtedly praise her. What fools! Finally, the smoker approaches her. He looks concerned and gestures towards where I stand. They walk together to the door and open it. What are you doing here? She asks me. I wish that you'd told me you were coming here. As I've said before, what I dash. Shut up. A charming attempt at winning me back. She turns to the smoker. Harold, wasn't it? Walk me to my car. Sure thing. He looks at me in disgust, lapdog that he is. I can walk my own girlfriend to her car, I say. For the last time. I'm not your girlfriend anymore. Now please step out of our way. I do, and I watch them walk into the parking lot. At her car, they stop. They talk for a moment, look back at me, and finally, both get into it. I use my key to slip through her front door 5 minutes after they do. I can tell they're already getting busy. I walk quietly over behind the couch. They're kissing, and he's really into it. It's embarrassing. This beautiful, fat motherfucker probably hasn't been laid since high school. My girl can smell me, and she looks up at me. Casanova is too engrossed to notice. Her mouth moves to his neck, kissing it on the right side. He leans his head back, eyes closed in pleasure. I bend over the couch, putting my mouth on the other side of his neck. Our fangs sink into his throat in unison. He lets out a surprised yelp that melts into a moan of ecstasy. At least they always go out feeling good. As we feed, I savor the richly marbled taste of the man's blood, thanking God for the rise of fast food in this nation. Chianti, Bordeaux, nothing can hold a candle to a good old American red. Stories number 13. A strange man is stalking my daughter and me. I've always been very protective of my daughter. Since she was a baby, I've had certain rules. No strange men in her life, no overnights away from home, and no pictures of her posted online. You may think these are extreme, but I've seen what the world is like. She's safer this way. Last week, we were at the park when I saw a strange man staring at us. At first I thought I was imagining things. I can be a bit paranoid when it comes to her. But after I saw him again, pointing his phone at us, I had a bad feeling. I gathered Claire and we left. I looked back, he hadn't followed us. As I often did, I wished David were still around. I knew being a single parent would be hard, balancing work and raising Claire, having to do everything myself. But no one tells you how much more you worry when you have no one else to lean on. For the 1000th time I cursed David for abandoning us. I thought it was over. But the other day, I was dropping Claire off at school when I saw a car sitting outside, the man from the park in the driver's seat. I had flashbacks to years ago when I was stalked, the fear of never knowing when he would show up or what he'd do. I wouldn't go through that again, and neither would my daughter. Over the next few days, I began to see him everywhere. Always following us, taking pictures. I tried to keep Claire distracted from it. I didn't want her to be scared. But I had to do something. I had to keep her safe. One day I saw him following me. I was alone. He could do anything. Desperate to get away, I ducked into an alley. I breathed heavily, praying I'd lost him. But then I felt a hand on my shoulder. "I've found you." Panicked, I turned and plunged the knife into his stomach. He looked at me, shocked, and fell to the ground as his life poured onto the pavement. I reached down and searched his pockets for a clue to who he was and why he was following me. In them, I found a business card that said, "Thomas Geller, Private Investigator," along with a picture of my daughter with strange words written under it. Melanie Thompson. Missing since 2019. Why did he have these lies? The danger passed, I calmed down and thought. I'd have to get rid of his body, just like I'd gotten rid of David's years ago when he'd threatened to call my psychiatrist after I'd brought Claire home from the hospital. As if love could ever be crazy, why hadn't he understood that she belonged with me? We'd have to move now, start over somewhere new. But I'd do what I had to. Claire was mine, and no one would take her away. Ever. Stories number 14. Bullies made me who I was. I won't let it happen again. The first time I saw Colin, he was crouched in the hallway, gathering his books off the floor. They'd kicked him down again. No one helped him. No one ever did. I knelt beside him, handing over a book he'd missed. "Why don't you fight back?" He hesitated. "I'm scared." He got up, adjusted his glasses and shuffled off without another word. Stealing his lunch money, hitting him, shoving him into the lockers. Each time, Colin just took it. Each time, they pushed further. He reminded me of myself, who I used to be. Something stirred deep inside. Anger? Anger was part of it. No, this was a need to uproot problems. Colin could be headed down a road he shouldn't. I had to stop that. They turned their attention to me within a few days. I was the new kid after all, and I did stick up for Colin. It wasn't long before I became their new target. I've been through this in the past. They want the path of least resistance. That's how bullies work. I gave it to them. Friday, Jake and his two lackeys cornered me in the empty gym. It was cliché, really. The smug grin, rolled up sleeves, the intimidation. The gym was not an ideal place for what I had planned. I had to lead them away. "You've got a real smart mouth, don't you?" Jake sneered, stepping closer. I didn't answer. I just let my eyes dart between them like I was trapped. People like them loved that, seeing fear across someone's face. I made my voice tremble. "I don't want any trouble. Please, not so tough now, huh?" Exactly. Give them the feeling of power. The first punch landed on my stomach. I doubled over, gasping, though it hardly hurt. Maybe it was due to the miracle of my birth. The second punch grazed my jaw, and I stumbled, falling to my knees. Jake laughed, and his cronies joined in. I looked at the double doors leading to the back exit. Perfect. Make them feel like a predator. I stumbled toward the doors, dragging my feet just enough to seem disoriented, but not slow. Of course, they'd follow me. The back exit was deserted, as I'd hoped. Jake caught up, yanking my collar from behind. The knife slid out of my sleeve. They didn't have time to react. The knife found their throats, one after another. It was too easy, effortless. I'd done this countless times before. I'm no hero. I'm not pretending to be one. In my last life, I was a serial killer. I know where I'm going when this ends. If hell exists, it's waiting for me. I thought it was over when the noose snapped my neck. But I opened my eyes, small and helpless, showered with smiles warm and unearned. A second chance. To make sure the cycle ends. To drag the damned with me, one by one, until there's no one left to turn a Colin into me. Stories number 15. The cops found my missing car. "You need to come with me, ma'am," Officer Dunn said. He placed his hand on my back, gently prodding me toward his cruiser. "What's this about?" I asked. He shrugged. "I was just asked to pick you up." Officer Dunn put me in the back of the cruiser and then drove out of the neighborhood. At first, I thought he was taking me to the station, but I knew that wasn't the case when he turned away from town and headed toward the lake. Once I realized where we were going, it was easy to guess why the police had picked me up. "You lied to me, Mrs. Brooke," Detective Allen pointed his finger in my face. Those were the first words he said to me after I'd gotten out of Officer Dunn's cruiser. He wasn't wrong, I had lied to him. "Why did you drive your car into the lake?" he asked. "I had to," I admitted. "It was the only way to save my daughter." "Save her from what?" "From her father." After that, I explained how I lied about my car being stolen the week before and that the injuries my daughter and I had suffered were actually inflicted by my husband and not the carjackers. "Where's your husband now?" he asked. I'd originally told the detective my husband was out of town. I pointed to where a crane was in the process of pulling my car out of the water. Detective Allen looked over his shoulder at the crane and then back at me. "He's in the car," he sounded shocked. I nodded. "Did you kill your husband, Mrs. Brooke?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, but I tried to." I thought back to the night my husband changed. He'd come home from work complaining about some weird bug bite he'd gotten on his neck. When he couldn't get it to stop itching, he became agitated and started pacing the room, panting heavily. That's when I noticed something moving under his skin. I suggested we go to the hospital, but he refused. Concerned, my daughter came out of her room to see what was wrong. Without provocation, my husband tried to bite her, then he tried to bite me when I came to her defense. Thankfully I was able to fight him off, but it took a great deal of effort and several blows to his head to knock him out. Once I thought he was no longer a threat, I loaded him into the trunk and was going to take him to the hospital, but he woke up and almost escaped. "So you drove him into the lake," Detective Allen finished for me. I nodded. "The way I see it," he said, "you still killed him." Behind him, my car was lifted out of the water. As soon as it was free, something started banging on the inside of the trunk. "I'm not sure anything can kill him," I replied. Stories number 16. Maisie's Kiss. Maisie realized her kisses kill when she was about 10. She was at the playground with her friend Henry. They ran over the seesaw together, holding hands for some reason. And then, by the seesaw, Henry leaned over and kissed her fully on the lips, before letting go of her hand and jumping on the seat. Maisie stood still for a moment, confused, then ran to the other side, raised her arms, gripped the seat, pulled it down and jumped on. Henry went up, and then he fell like a stone with a very loud thud. He lay crumpled on the rubbery pink playground gravel, dead. They said it was a random heart failure, but Maisie knew better. After that, she avoided boys. Boys didn't like that, especially as she was a pretty little thing with soft curvy lips, and the more she avoided them, the more they tried to kiss her. There was Jerry, who cornered her in the school cloakroom, and kissed her with a loud smacking sound. She wriggled out of his grasp and dashed out, only to hear once again that loud thud. She knew before she turned around that he was dead, lying lifeless among the stinky sneakers littering the floor. And Michael, who stole a kiss on the bus, just before his stop. He remained alive long enough to reach the door, and then tumbled out, head first, onto the pavement below. And poor Paul. Maisie actually liked Paul. He was so good-looking with bright sparkly eyes, and he was so kind and smart. They did homework together. They both wanted to be doctors. He helped her patiently with maths while she wrote up his essays. He would never kiss her suddenly, when she didn't want it. She hoped desperately that would make a difference, inching closer and closer to him in their study sessions, letting her hand accidentally on purpose brush against his. Until he asked politely, "Maisie, I've been dying to kiss you. May I?" She forgot about her curse in her hormonal adolescent delight, and leaned forward with her lips parted and her eyes shining. "Oh Paul," she breathed. As his lips pressed softly but firmly against hers, her whole body filled with joy and she could barely let him pull away. They looked deep into each other's eyes, glowing with young love. And then, she shrieked out in despair as the light dimmed in his eyes. He slumped over, while she sobbed uncontrollably. She never forgave herself. She gave up her dream of becoming a doctor, and relentlessly pursued another career, specializing in dealing with unwanted husbands and lovers. A surprisingly lucrative field. She smiled at her latest prey, Jason, sitting across the restaurant table. She didn't feel bad anymore, those emotions were long gone. She had a job to do, and he shouldn't have asked her out when he was already married, asshole. She leaned in. She was busy, and didn't want to waste too much time on this one. Stories number 17. I make a living delivering food. I got a strange request from a customer. I've been door dashing ever since my ex-boyfriend got me fired from my regular job. I don't want to go too into detail, but he didn't take our breakup very well. My latest order was from Taco Bell, 2 Crunchwrap Supremes, without the tostada, and extra Diablo sauce. When I picked it up, I texted the customer like I always do. "Hey, just picked up your order, I'm on my way." Their response was kinda strange. "I need you to deliver it to me in my room." It's hard enough trying to make a living off crappy tips, but it's way worse when people get weird. "I'm sorry, I can drop it off inside your door, but I don't feel comfortable doing anything beyond that. Hold on, I am 83 and bedridden. If you don't bring it to me then I won't be able to get it. Please, I'll double your tip." Guess I didn't have a choice. I pulled into their driveway, Taco Bell in hand, then went into their house. Definitely an old person's house. Tacky, floral wallpaper, and dozens of photos framed and hung up on the walls. I tried to call my customer, but they didn't pick up. Instead, they texted, "Upstairs." I sighed, and wandered around until I found the stairs. There was only one room on the second floor, and after knocking a raspy voice whispered, "Come in." Inside was a very old woman. Her skin was so wrinkly and loose that it looked like it was falling off her bones. She was wrapped up under the covers in her pajamas and a nightcap. I gently shook the bag, and the old lady reached out from the covers beckoning for it. I gave it to her, and she pulled it right out and started eating. I stood there for a few moments before going, "Ahem. Right," the old lady whispered, "your tip is in the drawer there." She pointed toward her nightstand. I opened the nightstand drawer, hoping to get out of there as quickly as possible, but there wasn't any money inside, just a photo of me and my ex-boyfriend. "What the fuck is this? You were so cute. Why did you break up? Are you fucking serious? You never gave him a reason." "It's none of your fucking business," I shrieked. The granny shot up in bed, shouting, "Tell me." I found videos on his laptop. He was drowning animals. She started cackling. "He's going to do much worse to you than that." Her voice was different now, younger, deeper. "Where's the old lady?" I asked. "What the hell did you do?" "She's gone now, just like you will be soon, now that I've trapped you." "I wouldn't count on it," I said. "Why not?" She started coughing uncontrollably, until she started spitting out blood. "Did you really think I would forget your Taco Bell order, you fuck boy? You should have ordered something different if you wanted to trick me."